Hello again, this is your Fairy Book Mama. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 14 of Abe Lincoln Gets His Chance by Frances Kavanagh. The legislature met for several weeks at a time. Between sessions, Abe worked at various jobs in New Salem and read his law books. Most of his studying was done early in the morning and late at night. He still found time to see a great deal of Anne Rutledge, and something of her gentle sweetness was to live on forever in his heart. After Anne died, he tried to forget his grief by studying harder than ever. The year that he was 28, he took his examination and was granted a lawyer's license. He decided to move to Springfield, which had recently been made the capital of the state. It was a cold March day when he rode into this thriving little town. He hitched his horse to the hitching rack in the public square and entered one of the stores. Joshua Speed, the owner, a young man about Abe's age, looked up with a friendly smile. "Howdy, Abe," he said. "So, you are going to be one of us?" "I reckon so," Abe answered. "Say, Speed, I just bought myself a bedstead. How much would it cost me for a mattress and some pillows and blankets?" Joshua took a pencil from behind his ear. He did some figuring on a piece of paper. "I can fix you up for about $17. Abe felt the money in his pocket. He had only $7. His horse was borrowed, and he was still $1,000 in debt. Joshua saw that he was disappointed. He had heard Abe make speeches, and Abe was called one of the most promising young men in the legislature. Joshua liked him and wanted to know him better. "Why don't you stay with me until you can do better?" he suggested. "I have a room over the store and a bed big enough for two." A grin broke over Abe's homely features. "Good," he said. "Where is it?" "You'll find some stairs over there behind the pile of barrels. Go on up and make yourself at home." Abe enjoyed living with Joshua Speed, and he enjoyed living in Springfield. He soon became as popular as he had once been in Pigeon Creek and in New Salem. As the months and the years went by, more and more people came to him whenever they needed a lawyer to advise them. For a long time he was poor, but little by little he paid off his debts. With his first big fee, he bought a quarter section of land for his stepmother, who had been so good to him. The part of his work that Abe liked best was riding the circuit. In the spring and again in the fall, he saddled Old Buck, his horse, and set out with a judge and several other lawyers to visit some of the towns close by. These towns on the circuit were too small to have law courts of their own. In each town, the lawyers argued the cases, and the judge settled the disputes that had come up during the past 6 months. After supper, they liked to gather at the inn to listen to Abe tell funny stories. "I laughed until I shook my ribs loose," said one dignified judge. The other lawyers often teased Abe. "You ought to charge your clients more money," they said, "or you'll always be as poor as Job's turkey." One evening they held a mock trial. Abe was accused of charging such small fees that the other lawyers could not charge as much as they should. The judge looked as solemn as he did at a real trial. "You are guilty of an awful crime against the pockets of your brother lawyers," he said severely. "I hereby sentence you to pay a fine." There was a shout of laughter. "I'll pay the fine," said Abe good-naturedly. "But my own firm is never going to be known as Ketchum and Cheatham." Meanwhile, a young lady named Mary Todd had come to Springfield to live. Her father was a rich and important man in Kentucky. Mary was pretty and well-educated. Abe was a little afraid of her, but one night at a party he screwed up his courage to ask her for a dance. "Miss Todd," he said, "I would like to dance with you the worst way." As he swept her around the dance floor, he bumped into other couples. He stepped on her toes. "Mr. Lincoln," said Mary as she limped over to a chair, "you did dance with me the worst way, the very worst." She did not mind that he was not a good dancer. As she looked up into Abe's homely face, she decided that he had a great future ahead of him. She remembered something she had once said as a little girl. "When I grow up, I want to marry a man who will be President of the United States." Abe was not the only one who liked Mary Todd. Among the other young men who came to see her was another lawyer, Stephen A. Douglas. He was no taller than Mary herself, but he had such a large head and shoulders that he had been nicknamed the Little Giant. He was handsome and rich and brilliant. His friends thought that he might be president someday. "No," said Mary, "Abe Lincoln has a better chance to succeed." Anyway, Abe was the man she loved. The next year, they were married. "I mean to make him President of the United States," she wrote to a friend in Kentucky. "You will see that, as I always told you, I will yet be the President's wife." At first, Mary thought that her dream was coming true. In 1846, Abe was elected a member of the United States Congress in Washington. He had made a good start as a political leader, and she was disappointed when he did not run for a second term. Back he came to Springfield to practice law again. By 1854, there were 3 lively boys romping through the rooms of the comfortable White House that he had bought for his family. Robert was 11, Willie was 4, and Tad was still a baby. The neighbors used to smile to see Lawyer Lincoln walking down the street carrying Tad on his shoulders, while Willie clung to his coattails. The boys adored their father. Mary did too. But she wished that Abe would be more dignified. He sat reading in his shirt sleeves, and he got down on the floor to play with the boys. His wife did not think that was any way for a successful lawyer to act. It also worried her that he was no longer interested in politics. And then something happened that neither Mary nor Abe had ever expected. Their old friend, Stephen A. Douglas, who was now a senator in Washington, suggested a new law. Thousands of settlers were going west to live, and in time they would form new states. The new law would make it possible for the people in each new state to own slaves, if most of the voters wanted to. Abraham Lincoln was so aroused and indignant that he almost forgot his law practice. He traveled around Illinois making speeches. There were no laws against having slaves in the South, but slavery must be kept out of territory that was still free, he said. The new states should be places for poor people to go to better their condition. Not only that, but it was wrong for one man to own another. Terribly wrong. If a Negro is a man, he told one audience, then my ancient faith teaches me that all men are created equal. Perhaps he was thinking of the first time he had visited a slave market. He was remembering the words in the Declaration of Independence that had thrilled him as a boy. 2 years later, Abraham Lincoln was asked to be a candidate for the United States Senate. He would be running against Douglas. Abe wanted very much to be a senator. Even more, he wanted to keep slavery out of the new states. Taking part in the political campaign would give him a chance to say the things that he felt so deeply. I am convinced I'm good enough for it, he told a friend. But in spite of it all, I'm saying to myself every day, it is too big a thing for you. You will never get it. Mary insists, however, that I'm going to be Senator and President of the United States, too. Perhaps it was his wife's faith in him that gave him the courage to try. Never was there a more exciting campaign. Never had the people of Illinois been so stirred as during that hot summer of 1858. A series of debates was held in 7 different towns. The 2 candidates, Douglas, the little giant, and Old Abe, the giant killer, as his friends called him, argued about slavery. People came from miles around to hear them. On the day of a debate, an open platform for the speakers was decorated with red, white, and blue bunting. Flags flew from the housetops. When Senator Douglas arrived at the railroad station, his friends and admirers met him with a brass band. He drove to his hotel in a fine carriage. Abe had admirers, too. Sometimes a long procession met him at the station. Then Abe would be embarrassed. He did not like what he called fizzle gigs and fireworks. But he laughed when his friends in town drove him to his hotel in a hay wagon. This was their way of making fun of Douglas and his fine manners. Senator Douglas was an eloquent orator. While he was talking, some of Abe's friends would worry. Would old Abe be able to answer? Would he be able to hold his own? Then Abe would unfold his long legs and stand up. The giant killer towered so high above the little giant that a titter ran through the crowd. When he came to the serious part of his speech, there was silence. His voice reached to the farthest corners of the crowd as he reminded them what slavery really meant. He summed it up in a few words. You work and toil and earn bread, and I'll eat it. Both men worked hard to be elected, and Douglas won. I feel like the boy, said Abe, who stubbed his toe. It hurts too bad to laugh, and I'm too big to cry. All of those who loved him, Mary, his wife, in her neat white house, Sarah, his stepmother, in her little cabin, more than 100 miles away, and his many friends were disappointed. But not for long. The part he took in the Lincoln-Douglas debates made his name known throughout the United States. Abe Lincoln's chance was coming. End of chapter 14. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and hit that notification bell for when I post another book or chapter. If you're going to bed, sweet dreams. If not, have a wonderful day. Bye.